All done. All silent. Going. Gone. So congratulations.
Welcome to the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate. Each episode, we chat with real estate author and industry leader Peter O'Malley to discuss the current property market conditions and provide insights to assist you on your property journey.
Welcome to another edition of Current Market Insights. As always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Mr. Peter O'Malley. Peter, good to see you again.
Great to see you, Ciaran.
Peter, look, it's we're coming to the end of the month here, and we're heading into September, where there's a few things happening. We're obviously entering spring, which is exciting and always has an impact on the property cycle. But at the same time, we're also going to see a new RBA governor next month. I wonder, with a rate decision probably expected sometime in the next week or so, will this be Philip Lowe's last one as head of the Reserve Bank?
It'll be his last meeting where he announces the decision, yes, Ciaran, and that decision next Tuesday will be rates remain on hold. The CPI number that was out today was 4.9%, welcomed by the market, and certainly gives no reason as to why the RBA would need to increase interest rates next week.
So you mentioned CPI is on hold at 4.9%, did you say?
Not on hold, but it came in at 4.9%.
4.9%. Yeah. So what we've talked in the past about, what are the factors that drive CPI and what drive inflation in this country. What do you think is the sort of major reason that CPI is holding relatively firm at the moment?
If we go to the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the announcement that came out, they said CPI inflation is often impacted by items with volatile price changes like automotive, fuel, fruit and vegetables and holiday travel. And it can be helpful to exclude these items from the headline CPI indicator to provide a view of underlying inflation. And when excluding volatile items, the decline in annual inflation is a more modest 5.8% in for the month of July as opposed to 6.1% in June. So inflation is a little bit sticky, is what you'd take out of that. But the headline inflation number has fallen from 5.4% in June to 4.9%, and that was announced in late August. So everyone welcomes that number. It's going in the right direction, but we're not out of the woods yet. Michelle Bullock, the incoming RBA governor, said that inflation is still her primary concern, and therefore she won't be in a rush to reassure the market that there's no more rate hikes until inflation is firmly within their target band of 2 to 3% inflation.
So given that we've had a bit of a drop in inflation, as you mentioned, and we've come down to a more modest 4.9, when, as a consumer who is seeing the cost of everything, including fuel and including, the cost of living just feels so exponentially high at the moment, when are we likely to feel those changes on our end, do you think, where it just feels a little bit more manageable to go about your day-to-day?
Well, the rate of inflationary growth is slowing, but the price increases that have occurred to date, Ciaran, are baked in. So I don't think you're going to go to Woolworths or Coles anytime soon and find things are substantially cheaper or noticeably cheaper, because for that to happen, you'd need to be in a deflationary environment where prices are falling 1 or 2% a month and people are deciding to hang on to cash in such an environment because their purchasing power is going up. Where at the moment, with inflation running at the rate that it is, people are more likely to spend quickly because the purchasing power of their cash is diminishing.
So you're telling me that, the two big supermarkets, Woolies and Coles, that raise prices during this period are just going to enjoy high profits now because they've baked in these price rises to, offset the rising cost of goods, whether or not that's true for them?
I see no case where Coles and Woolies or any of those big multinationals will start cutting prices unless things really derail, in which case the RBA would then find themselves cutting interest rates to stimulate the economy. But whilst ever the economy has got the life in it that it does at the moment, the price rises that we've all experienced in the last 18 months are baked in, and what the RBA are trying to do at the moment is stop further increases in those prices of goods.
Well, that's a little bit unfortunate, I think. Look, pivoting slightly, I guess, to focus a little bit on the property market, which is really what we're all about here. Now that we've got these new CPI figures, we've got a period now where you're predicting the RBA will hold rates How is that going?
Well, that's market consensus
That's
as well.
That's the consensus, yeah. Look, I tend to agree. That's what I've read as well. What's that going to look like moving forward as we, head into spring, which is typically a very busy period for property? What's the outlook likely to be?
Well, on recent editions of Current Market Insights, we spoke about the impact of the June rate rise, which was nearly a rate rise too far in many people's view. If you look at Stephen Koukoulas, for example, a respected market analyst, he says the RBA have overhiked, taking the cash rate to 4.1%, which is a mortgage rate somewhere between 5.6 and 6.2%. And he feels that the RBA will be forced to cut sooner than many people think. When the RBA did hit the market with that rate increase in June that many people felt was an unneeded and unjustified rate increase, we saw a sharp increase in listing volumes, Ciaran, and that was suggesting that the RBA may have overdone it in terms of households' ability to withstand the impact of fighting inflation with these higher rates. But now that interest rates have been on hold for the last couple of months and will be again in September, the panic listing, if you like, from vendors seems to have subsided for the time being, and agents have gone from having a surprisingly high amount of winter stock to suddenly saying, hey, I don't think I am going to be oversupplied in spring with new listings, which is what it was looking like in late July for many agents, ourselves included. So there are many vendors that pick spring as the best time to put their property to the market because it presents better and it segues nicely with selling at the tail end of the year and being rehoused coming into the new calendar year, and there'll always be people that are working toward that cycle. So I think home buyers will see a better range of stock on the market in the next few weeks. But the word that's coming through now is that due to the stabilisation in interest rates, the panic selling that was starting to build in the market has just subsided for the time being.
Yeah, I think when we spoke with Mike Salvatis a few weeks ago, he mentioned that he'd been to quite a few sales that were mortgagee sales or possibly from distressed sellers. I certainly haven't come across anyone like that myself on the ground, but have you seen any sellers out there at the moment that have expressed that, they're needing to sell because they're in a bit of a financial pickle?
I think the people that were overwhelmed and overburdened by the interest rate settings of the day have already made their move and sold into the market. So a few months ago, particularly again in conjunction with that last interest rate rise in June, we were seeing people openly say we don't know where the peak rate is and we've got to go, or we're going to go now because we can't withstand much more. I think the market comfortably absorbed the first sort of 10 rate rises, if you like. Everybody accepted that interest rates couldn't stay at their COVID emergency levels, but any further increase in interest rates from here, if they were to happen, would be a hammer blow for many households. I'm not suggesting there are further rate rises, Ciaran. As you may or may not remember, my primary prediction for 2023, early 2024, is the RBA would be forced to cut a lot earlier than people predicted, and that's still the position that I hold. I think as people are forced to refinance from 2.5% mortgage rates to 5.5%, 6% mortgage rates,
if not more,
that's going to have an immense impact on their lifestyle and their ability and desire to continue paying those mortgages.
Well, certainly from where I sit, I certainly hope they cut earlier than expected. Look, I'm interested, Peter, in one of the other metrics. We talk about stock levels as a measure of what the market's doing. One of the things we talk about as agents is days on market and how long it takes for us to sell a property. Are we seeing, or are you seeing any particular changes in the days on market at the moment, given that we've got a bit of a renewed frenzy for properties? I would have expected through interest rate rises that those days would have expanded out quite a little bit. So in your experience, what are you seeing week to week in terms of how your campaigns are going for your vendors?
There's two types of listings at the moment, those that sell very quickly and those that take quite some time to sell. And there doesn't seem to be any middle ground there. And defining that for people that are listening to this today, those that sell quickly are the vendors that have a pricing expectation that is aligned with the market. So they haven't employed their real estate agent, their selling agent, because the agent is saying, I can get you a vast premium to the broader market. Those that are taking some time to sell usually come back to the old chestnut that the vendor's expectations are above the market price and the vendor's expectations are above the market price because that's what the real estate agent told them they could achieve for the property when they were pitching for the business. And I know myself that most listings at the moment are hotly contested. There can be anywhere between 3 and 6 firms, reputable firms, good firms, fighting for the one piece of business. And as has happened since Adam and Eve sold their place, real estate agents will inflate the price as a means of winning the listing. And that feels good as a vendor when you go with a high quoting agent who's optimistic about your ability and their ability to achieve a premium price. But when you go on the market, your home is not competing, making real estate agents compete for the listing against each other. Your home is competing against other buyers, other vendors in the marketplace for a buyer. And if you're misaligned on price, it'll all come crashing down at that point.
I wonder, we've just very quickly touched on buyers who, as you say, have got an increased appetite to purchase at the moment. We've spoken about in the last few weeks the return of investors to the market. I read an article just last week suggesting that, in fact, investors never left, which was contrary to our experience. But I wonder, other than people just being, I guess, a little more voracious with their buying, is there been any significant change in July in the types of buyers that you're seeing come to properties?
We're not really seeing a great deal of investors on the ground. The only investors that we're seeing on the ground are people that might be looking to come to Sydney in 12 months' time but are picking something up now, for example, or are looking to move into the subject property but will lease it out for a year or two to get some taxation benefits. The vast majority of people that we're dealing with are owner-occupiers, and the rental crisis, the lack of housing, the desire to be in certain locations are all the influences that are causing people to make the decisions that they are at the moment. And then, as there always will be, there's always people that need a bigger home and there's always people that want a smaller home. So real estate at the end of the day is a need. And if you need a larger home, you need a larger home. And if you need a smaller home because your home is too big, it's surplus to requirements, you're going to downsize. So they're all the things that drive the property market. Yeah, sales volumes and listings are down from their historical norms, but there's certainly enough transactions happening out there for someone who wants to buy and sell.
So unsurprisingly, if you're a vendor looking to sell, if you have a good conversation up front with your agent, set a realistic price point, and run a good campaign, you should sell pretty comfortably right now.
This is absolutely. This is a much easier environment to sell in than last September, that's for sure.
So tell me, Pete, I see over Twitter all the time commentators like Louis Christopher from SQM or, Kukalis talking about, or Domain or REA, whoever it might be, talking about auction clearance rates. Surely I can't be the only person that's confused by what I read or what I see on the TV at night. Why are there so many different figures? What do they mean? How do they correlate? And as someone who's just looking to buy a home, which ones do I need to be looking at?
Well, let's go to Domain's numbers for last Saturday, being the 26th of August. They called it an auction clearance rate of 76%. On the Tuesday, SQM Research called it, for Sydney, these numbers are, an auction clearance rate on Saturday of 56%. So there's a 20% spread or a 25% difference between what Domain arrived at and what SQM Research came up with for the auction clearance rate last weekend. The big difference there is that Domain's 76% was based on the 542 auctions that were reported, even though their numbers had 736 auctions scheduled. So there's, what are we seeing there? We're seeing 190 results had gone missing from the Domain numbers, and clearly, based on the 20% drop in the auction clearance rate from 76% to 56% between Domain and SQM Research, it's fair to say that of the 190 results that Domain did not collect on Saturday night, the vast majority of those were failed auctions. So unfortunately, we can't get accurate auction clearance rates on the Saturday night for the media loop. And any consumer out there trying to gauge the success or otherwise of the auction system needs to know the number they're hearing on a Saturday night or reading about on the Sunday morning in the newspaper is fudged at worst, false at best, because there's too many results that are missing for the true facts to be known. So SQM Research only released their auction clearance rate on the Tuesday after the Saturday, and at that point they have meticulously and strategically gone around and collated and collected every auction result so that they can come up with a holistic clearance rate rather than a sample clearance rate. And the sample clearance rate is continually, and when I say continually, over 15 years, is continually higher than the holistic clearance rate.
So does that suggest, as a consumer, that the numbers being reported to Domain and realestate.com or whoever it might be are being reported by agents directly?
No, the auction houses. So there's a lot of auctioneers who will conduct auctions for a number of different brands and agencies across Sydney, and some results get reported easier than others. Some real estate agents won't mark up the outcome of the auction until Monday morning. Some will sell a property on Saturday at lunchtime and mark it up on the internet immediately, in which case Domain grabbed that result. The other thing I would say is a number of the successful sales actually happen prior to auction, meaning it's much easier for Domain and SQM Research to be able to identify the successful campaigns because they're marked up as sold before the scheduled auction date.
So does that mean that if agency A, for example, runs a campaign, they've had it for 28 days, they get to auction morning and for one reason or another decide to sell, does that then get reported as a successful auction even though it never made it to an auction?
That's right. So it's a successful auction campaign. So the clearance rate is not the percentage of properties that sold under the hammer. It's the number of auction campaigns that sold on or before auction day.
So if you take these raw numbers that we've got here and just say 76 or 20 or 25% difference between the two, could you safely say then that 1 in 5 or even 1 in 4 campaigns that is run as an auction fails as a general rule?
Oh, well, I think you can say more than that. See, the difference between an auction clearance rate of 76% versus an auction clearance rate of 56% has a great bearing on how the next vendor decides to put their property to the market. Clearly, you're much more inclined to go with the auction system if clearance rates are 76, 80% than if they are at 50, 55%. So the true numbers are saying that the auction clearance rate is 56% for last weekend. History tells us, according to Louis Christopher, that if you start getting into the low 50s and high 40s as a true clearance rate, that's the point at which prices are probably falling because there is not sufficient buyer demand to meet the vendor's expectations on price. So on those numbers alone, we're at that precipice there where the price rally of 6.5% that we've seen this year may be petering out, and that trend will be severely tested during spring. Even though we're not saying that stock levels are going to accelerate to massive levels, they are going to increase, and that is going to test buyer appetite, because the one thing that has supported the auction clearance rate through winter is buyer demand has comfortably outstripped seller supply. But will that hold between now and Christmas?
Yeah, very good question. Peter, I wonder then, with all of the information we've gathered today, and we've talked about stock levels, we've talked about days on market, we've talked about the auction clearance rate, could you say, or would it be reasonable to suggest that auction, if it only works, say, 55% of the time, let's take SQM on the low end, if it only works 55% of the time, would it be reasonable to suggest that auction is probably not the, ultimate sales solution that the media would want us all to believe? Constantly the media reporting is auction amazing over reserve. It's always this overhyped kind of thing. Would it be reasonable to suggest that just your traditional, private treaty negotiation campaign is going to get almost 100% clearance rate?
Look, what I'd say, if you're talking about 100% clearance rate, the only thing that's got 100% clearance rate is a well-priced, well-managed listing. That's what will always sell in the property market.
Irrespective of market conditions, right?
And irrespective of sale process. So when we're talking about the Sydney clearance rate, the Sydney's now, 5.5 million, maybe heading towards 6 million people. The Sydney Metro is counted as from Emu Plains, up to the southern end of the Central Coast and North Wollongong, essentially. So in that clearance rate there's many segments of the Sydney market that might be poor, like we've spoken about, high-rise apartments in suburbia, with special levies. Real estate agents still put that sort of product to auction.
Poor properties, you mean, for auction?
Yeah, that's right. Just the wrong mix. You're never going to have a competitive bidding process on a one-bedroom unit in suburbia in a high-rise that's got special levies hanging over it. So the thing about the auction clearance rate, in my view, is real estate agents put the wrong things to auction, and that is one of the reasons why you end up with a clearance rate of 56%. I could, if I wanted to, have a 100% clearance rate, and that is I'd only put the properties to auction that I know are going to be ultra competitive. And when you've been in the real estate game in a marketplace for long enough, you know what segments of the market there's deep buyer demand for, and you know the product that's not. And anyone that's got a unique property or something that's going to take some effort to sell and they want to run an auction campaign, I say I'm not the real estate agent for you, because I don't want to be back here in 4 weeks explaining to you why there's none or only one party interested in your property, because I know that now. It shouldn't be going under a sales process that requires multiple bidders. When you do have a property that will enjoy the interest of multiple bidders in a tight time frame, the next question you need to ask yourself is public auction or silent auction the best sale process, which is a whole new discussion again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, to wrap up today, Pete, I guess as we move into September and the spring cycle, there's certainly plenty of unknowns given the year we've had with interest rates, or the 18 months we've had with interest rates. But, you know, being in a period of stability is certainly comforting. It'd be interesting from my perspective anyway to see what happens. And who knows, you know, if things are going well, we might see a whole bunch of properties heading to auction and, clearing throughout the spring period.
And that's right, Ciaran, and that's why we call this Current Market Insights, and that's why we record this weekly. So it is timely, because what we were seeing 6-7 weeks ago is now not playing out the way that it was looking 6-7 weeks ago. The market at the moment is very beholden to events and news flow, if you like, and sentiment of the day. And we've got a view on what will happen during spring, but ultimately we'll call it as we see it.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get a chance to do that just next week. Thanks as always, Pete, for joining me, and I'll see you next time.
Will do. Thanks, Ciaran.
Thanks for joining us on the Current Market Insights podcast, brought to you by Harris Partners Real Estate, the podcast providing real estate insights you won't find anywhere else.